All right, everyone. All right, everyone. We are live. You should be able to hear me. This is Alabama versus Virginia in the first round of the States Cup. And we have a bit of a tough matchup, but our players are going to give it their best fight. We can see in round one of our players has lost. He faced a national master, but our player is a young Scholastic unrated player, so he put up a good fight. Just quickly going through the other round one games so far, we have Harshal versus Sochal, who is, I know I wrote it down somewhere. Thank you. Yeah, good luck to our team, and good luck to our opponents. Here it is. That opponent is going to be Sean Harshal. So a strong player rated over 2,200 against another young Scholastic player. It looks like a pretty even game so far. This young Scholastic player had a good showing in the state championship last weekend. Thank you for the follows. And then we have our top player against their fourth board. This is Farouk, who came in second at the state championship. And you can see that they are well into their game. Everything is still even there. And then the fourth game here is another young Scholastic player, a promising player who is quite good at rapid, is playing the black pieces here. Got a little bit of a late start. Our average rating, if you don't include the rating floor, is probably below 1,500. Theirs is close to 2,200. But we're looking to not have a shutout. I think that we have a few players that might be able to steal a half a point, maybe even a whole point here. Our top board definitely is capable of winning against national masters, as he did maybe multiple times this weekend, taking second in the state championship. So this should be a good matchup, a good warm-up for the Alabama team against one of the strongest teams in the league. So let's go through and talk a little bit about these positions. I may at times be slightly distracted since I am also the captain of the Alabama team, and I'm trying to make sure everything is working correctly. So in this board, we see that there's a half-open A file. Black has managed to get pretty nice control over the center, but white has the bishop pair. See those two pawns there, but the bishop pair, it seems like a position where objectively white should be fine, but there is a lot of danger. These pawns almost seem a little bit weak to me. A well-timed capture or push could lead to a lot of pressure on the king side. This bishop, while it is strong, also seems a little bit misplaced. I'm not sure exactly what it's aimed at, and it doesn't have a ton of squares to redirect itself to. So I think Harshal might have a little bit of trouble here, but he's up a little bit on the clock. This time control is 15 plus 2. In our next game, we have Farouk playing. We've got a half-open F file. So this looks like it's going to be a very tactical game. An open position with a lot of pieces left. A lot of times when you get an open position, it means some pieces and pawns have traded. Here we have some pawns traded, but the pieces all seem to be still on the board. Farouk is up a couple of minutes here, but white's bishop pair is chasing black's king and queen around the board at the moment. As we jump over to this fourth board before we stay in one place, we can see that white has some pressure along this diagonal. Let's see what opening this was. Okay, I was going to say I thought it was a Grunfeld. So black is giving up total control over the center in order to gain counterplay. And so this long diagonal controlled by the black bishop. We can see white has moved their rook off of that to avoid targets. And white has managed to create some pressure on the queen side. So at this point, I would say this is probably an opening success for white because black doesn't quite have the play they want. However, bishop pair, rook can come to the open file, a lot to left to be played. Yeah, and he's just getting stronger. While the team is low rated, it is 3 scholastic players and a college student, so they are all very hard workers in terms of chess, and so they are putting in the hours, and they haven't had a chance to play very much since all of this began, so you can imagine that they've been putting in a lot of time during this pandemic. All right, so we'll leave it on this game for the moment, since Black is looking for some play. Actually, I want to go back and see Farouk's game, just because this is the game that looked the spiciest so far, with these bishops cutting into Black's position, but Black with the strong knights. White played f4 here, kicking this knight. We've got to see if that knight has anywhere good to go. I'm not sure it really wants to go back to f7, but that might be its only choice. Unless he's thinking of some kind of counterattack, and that's exactly what he does. That's the type of player that Farouk is. He is looking for those counterattacks, those tactics, those in-between moves. A very tactical player. I have played him once over the board, and I got a bit lucky to stumble into a tactical sequence where I came out ahead. I thought I was losing, he thought I was losing, and then at the end of the sequence, I was winning. So, lucked into that one. And we can see there may be some problems down this file with that knight moving and a discovery on the black queen. And it's a little bit hard for Black to get that queen to the f file to create play on a square like f2. Not only because the knight is there, but because the bishop controls a lot of squares. And you've also got to worry about this queen showing up on the h-file for a weird checkmate at some point. Okay, so knight exchange there. So let's go ahead and revisit the other games while this goes on. I want to try and stay on top of them, especially because we missed the first few minutes. If there are any problems with the sound or the visuals, let me know. I should be able to fix them without too much trouble if I know there's a problem. All right, looking back at this game, not much has changed. We can see there was the capture on d4 that I talked about, the potential weakness of these pawns. Black does have a passed d-pawn now. Thank you for the follow. Science Squares. So that d-pawn, if it gets rolling in an endgame, could be important. White is trying to create play with that bishop pair still. Putting up a nice fight here. I don't even remember what Harshul's rating is, so let me bring it up. So Harshul is rated 1288, but that's very underrated. I'm pretty sure he's beaten me multiple times online in Blitz and Rapid games, so nothing to be sneezed at for sure. Okay, so that game's still going. This is the game we just looked at. Take a look here. We can see that White is trying to open up the queen side. So a lot of times in these Grunfeld positions, if Black can stop the White pawns from coming down the center, Black has chances to create a pass pawn or two themselves on the queen side. And so White is looking to get rid of both of these Black pawns so that all the endgames are good for White. So that's what we can see there. As I mentioned, the time control is 15 plus 2. So it is a time control that feels fast for the players and slow for the spectators. So that's why I'm trying to go game to game. If there is a game that you guys would like me to focus on, be sure to say so in the chat, and we can take a look at that. So I am not a Grunfeld player from either side of the board. But I'm wondering about this move e6 at some point, whether that's just a problem because the pass pawn gets further, or if it's a way to try and break down those pawns. As Black here, I'm really looking for a way of how do I get activity with my pieces, because it looks like all the endgames are going to be challenging, so we need to create some tactical threats. This knight, I don't love it. It can't retreat right now to either square. It can't go forward, maybe to c4 and lose a pawn. Yeah, I'm thinking he's going to lose at least a pawn here. Maybe more, so he backs up the bishop. Yeah, this is a classic case of a good bishop with no targets at all. And so it's one of those cases where black's pieces kind of ended up on the right squares, but didn't necessarily end up having any targets for him. Those games are still going. So let's see this material loss. Probably capturing with the bishop, I would guess. I don't think rook b8 is any kind of real threat. While he's thinking there, we'll swing back. Yep, he did take with the bishop. Okay, here we've got Harshul's game. His opponent is down under 4 minutes. Yeah, this pawn looks like it might become more of a weakness than a strength. This f-pawn definitely could be a weakness also. The exposed king with this many pieces on the board could be an issue. Black has managed to get rid of white's bishop pair, which in theory is good. I'm not sure what the idea is being doubled on the c file. I don't think we necessarily want to play c6 and trade. Maybe we do. I'd like this rook to do something, maybe on the e file beforehand. But this trade's a little bit ugly with threats on h2. So white has to decide, do they trade knights? Do they play... I guess queen d1 would be the only way to guard that knight. Trading seems a little bit ugly if we have to play like a move like f4. I don't think we can get away with taking this pawn and trying to play some kind of bishop c3 tactic. That looks a little bit crazy. All right, let's jump to the next game, Farouk's game. And we've got a pawn on c7 for white. We've got 2 bishops on the d file. And I wouldn't want to be either king in this position. I'll say that. I wouldn't want to be either king. So we went for the rook. And if the queen takes, we're going to block with our queen. Is that the idea? I think a close match would be fun. Okay, so he does block on f6. What's the material count? We've got a rook for a couple of pieces. Sounds like we've got a lot of exchanges on another board, so we'll check that out in a second. A lot of exchanges here too. If black can round up this c7 pawn, I think I like black's position. But the longer that pawn stays there, the more dangerous it seems for black. Now if the bishop moves, there's the idea of the rook coming down with check. I guess we've got a rook block, but it's not clear at all here how black wins that pawn. And if black doesn't win that pawn, it's going to be tricky. However, white down to 3 minutes. So if nothing else, Alabama is getting a nice consistent time edge. Missed rook e7. Rook e7 right away. Ah. Yeah, that looks pretty brutal. Rook e7 with the idea of the rook over here for a checkmate. Okay, looks like where their exchange is over here. Nope, this still looks pretty much the same. Black is doing something good with getting rid of one of their weak pawns. It does appear that white went ahead and traded that knight and played g3, create some light square weaknesses. I think their idea was to try and put the bishop on f4. Okay, so they're going to try and trace the queen away first before doing anything else. I like that in-between move. Time is going to be close here too. We might have 3 games going into some time pressure. Ooh, h3 pawn, danger. How do we guard that? Okay, throws in a check. Oh, and he's gonna come back to f1 perhaps? Is he gonna ignore this pawn and say, I don't care about it, I've got my own threats? We are going to keep jumping around since it looks like we've got some time pressure. Oh, he guards with queen to e6. That is not a move that was on my radar. Maybe he's even looking to trade queens. Yeah, if the white king remains safe, seems like a reasonable position. Okay, losing a pawn there. So that could be an issue. The king's not going to remain safe without a g3 pawn. And a quick look at these other two games. Black managed to trade one set of rooks. However, the threat is to push this pawn and queen. And black resigned. Tough. That looked like a really sharp game. So well played to both players there. Harshal's still going. And Sam is down material here. He is down the exchange and the pawn. So not great chances there. You will notice there's more time in this game. This game started a little bit late. So let's focus on this game that's lower on time. Rewind, see what we missed. He moved back, and this is looking tough now. The white king is the one that's exposed. The white king is the one that's exposed, and this rook on c1 is not able to help defend. So that looks tough. Just letting my team know that they are allowed to start their next game as long as their opponent is also done with their prior game. There isn't a big rush to continue the games. It is going to be a 4-0 first round, but I think 0-4 is not a huge surprise the first round. The boards were more lopsided this round than they ever will be otherwise. But I will say that it looks like we had close fights on multiple boards. I didn't really see any of the one board, but this is an unrated player playing against a national master. Just see what happened here. I'm not sure how much resistance there was here. I wish I could play like this when I was unrated. Yep, losing some material, and then, down just a couple of pawns. Not bad at all. Not bad at all for an unrated player. And then it's over from there. But, yeah, he should not be unhappy with that. And Harshal definitely putting up a good fight. This one is not over yet, because if black does not find a checkmate, they are down to 1:30. Yeah, that sounds pretty accurate. Strong opening principles, lost some footing later on, definitely. That middle game planning stage is the slowest thing to come to a lot of players. Knowing what to do whenever you don't know what to do in a middle game, tactics don't always fix that, especially when you're playing against a strong player and they don't leave tactics on the board. Okay, so let's see how long this white king can run around. He's got a couple moves to go to here. I don't see the checkmate yet, but it's definitely coming up. There probably is a forced mate here. There are just so many checks and discoveries, but black has 1 minute to find it. So the next round's games will kind of start as they do. If players are finished, they can start their next round. If the players aren't finished, they can wait until all the games are done. But we're going to stay focused on this one until this finishes. And then we'll take a look to see if any of the second round games have started. I'll go ahead and take this moment to update the score. I'll try to keep it as updated as possible for you guys. It is currently Alabama 0, Virginia 3. Okay. Harshal at least avoid some of the faster checkmates. This queen is playing some defense. You can hear me typing in the background as I'm letting my players know who they need to challenge. As I mentioned before, I am also the team captain, so we got double duty tonight. I'm also one of the directors and TDs, so hopefully I'm not required to do quadruple duty tonight. So that is our final game finishing there. So players are welcome to send their next challenges. Let's see if any of the games have started. Not yet. They might be taking a break. Hey Mark, welcome. So hopefully the players know who they're challenging. Let me bring up Zoom, make sure people aren't asking me. Okay, it seems like some people know. I'll go ahead and message my players, make sure that they know that they can start their next game. You can send your next challenge. And one more person to tell that to. Okay, we've got games. Perfect, perfect. Okay, so here we have our fourth board facing off against who I believe is their third board. So this is unrated, their second board against the 2247. We'll see what kind of fight he can give. Here we have their first board against our third board. So 2337 against our 1288, and they have begun. This will start soon. Farouk was taking a couple-minute break, and he will be back for the next round. And then, let's see, got to bring Sam up again. He has not sent his next challenge yet, but hopefully he does momentarily. So we have 2 games going already, which is perfect. I actually expected it to be a lot rougher of a transition between rounds. It looks like the game did not start. Perhaps they had the wrong colors. Let's see. Yeah, maybe their colors were flipped. Okay. So they should be getting started there. This is our only game currently going, so we'll focus in on this. We had a d4 opening. A solid approach from black and white. A little bit unusual with knight c6 because it blocks the c-pawn. At least that's something that I always try and tell students, not to block the c-pawn, especially against a d4 opening. However, we'll see whether that has any long-term strategical ramifications in this game. I'm not playing tonight. I am the team captain for Alabama and our official streamer. So I'm hoping that I will not have to play, since that would be a lot. I am one of the directors of the tournament, and Yeah, so a lot of other jobs going on, but I will jump in if needed. I don't believe Louisiana submitted a team, and I know that the South Division is missing a couple teams, so if you get a team together, they might let you in, Mark. Okay, so we got 2 games going. This game's not going yet. This game is up. We got a game going. Bring up that one against Mr. Willie Johnson. So we've got 3 games. This game will be starting in a moment. All right, and so we looked at the opening here. We can see black is going for a quick attack in this game. Early exchange on f3, half open f-file. White is a bit ahead in development, I would say, just because this black king is at least 2 moves away from castling. Also, we've got to be careful of some discoveries on this diagonal. And black says, I don't care about development. I don't care about discoveries. I am going for the king. So he appears to be an attacking player. This is the game we already looked at. Oh, and all 4 games have started. Perfect. Fast forward through this opening. We have a Sicilian, a c3 Sicilian, Alpine Sicilian. And if there's one thing that we can see here is Farouk is already getting his a bit of an open game, a bit of attacking possibility, so I'm sure he is liking that. Here we've got Sam's position, a d4 game. It looks like this is very much up Sam's alley, very much a d4 player. Very solid for a Scholastic player. A lot of times, in my experience, Scholastic players have tended to be more tactical than solid, but Sam likes a positional game. All right, so we're going to focus on this board first, since we saw that black was attacking, and we're going to give this a few moves. Again, let's see if black can go ahead and get developed, or if they're going to be able to get that king right away. This knight is doing a lot of moving about. Fortunately, none of the first 4 first-round games came down to a time scramble. So I'm glad that the 15 plus 2 wasn't the determining factor. All of the games were ended on the board. And speaking of which, I better update this match score to give Virginia their 4 points. Full 4 points. Okay, there we go. But I don't think that 0 will remain there forever. We've got to pause here. Let's switch to our next board. This is our board 3. And some really nice pawns. So I mentioned initially that he was blocking his c-pawn. And see how he brought his knight back and pushed that c-pawn, grabbed some nice space on the queen side. That's principled. We've got a nice bishop on f6. He pushes d4. He doesn't worry about that a-pawn. It probably isn't that important in this position. I wouldn't be worrying about it either. Good. He's not playing scared. Right? The worst thing you can do whenever you're a lower rated player is play scared, play boring chess, play for a draw. So I'm glad to see that he is going for it. Okay, here is our next game, and he's just threatening checkmate. Boom. We show up at the board, threatens checkmate right away. Thanks, Skylar. Yeah, I think I muted myself to do some typing. Yeah, mute, unmute, mute, unmute. So we can see there's some tactics down the D file here that white is going for while black is thinking. We can see that white is continuing to open up the black king. Black is making an effort to keep the position closed by pushing G4. Doesn't want to trade pawns and further open up the king. White makes the move F5. I guess closing out this bishop, but also closing out white's bishop. Opening up some attacks on G4. Black guards. So now the question is, do we play something like H3? Whose king is going to end up in more danger? Definitely a double-edged position here. Whose king is going to be in more danger if all these pawns on the king side disappear? That's what white has to think about here. And white says, no rush. Let me relocate my knight from the queen side over towards the king side to focus on these weaknesses. That is a high-class move right there, showing a lot of patience in an attacking position. So I like that. Let's jump back to this first game, because this game is still going and material is still equal. So well done to champion 2029, putting up a real nice fight here. The bishops are a little bit passive. The king is not yet safe, but material is equal. And there's certainly not a decisive blow yet for white. So I like it. Good potential there. Switching over to this game, this is the move we saw D4 played. So let's go back to Farouk's game, where we have the king side attack going. So he does finally develop the knight. Black has the option to trade off some of these minor pieces. But what's nice about this attacking position for white is that they have an attack and the endgames aren't necessarily that bad. Right? We don't have an isolated pawn. We aren't down a pawn. We don't have more pawn islands. And so the piece trades, while they may minimize the attack in the short term, they don't necessarily stop all of white's pressure. So that's a good situation for white to be in. Really puts the question to black about whether or not they want to trade. That pawn on e5 can be very annoying in endgames. It can help keep this king trapped in. It can make it harder to create pawn breaks. In terms of getting an isolated e-pawn in some cases. So black has to do some thinking there. Okay, we've already looked at this one. And this game has simplified a lot. So let's take a look here. This is their number 1 board versus our number 3 board. And if we scroll back a few moves, that was where we saw the d4 pawn push. And these were our remaining moves. The board opens up, and black has won a pawn. White has won a pawn, but black has the bishop pair, and we can see that black is going for the jugular here. Says, I'm going to go and try and get some kind of checkmate as soon as possible. There's pressure on g2 right now. This knight is looking to come into f5. If there was less time on the clock, I would probably prefer to be black here, because this looks like a really fun position. It's one of those positions where you don't really have to worry about the king at the moment, and you don't have to worry about material because you're already down a pawn. So feel free to give up more. Doesn't matter anyway. And so white's going to try and push that queen back. So while black decides where to put this queen, we'll go ahead and switch over to another game. Now, bishop to b5 attacking the rook. It looks close to trapped. I want to say this is one of the things that I was impressed with Farouk's games over the past weekend. I was tournament director, one of the organizers for the Alabama State Championship, held online this year, so I saw all the games, and he really does a good job of not getting tunnel visioned on one side of the board. Even if he's attacking, he's still looking at the other side of the board and seeing what kind of weaknesses and attacks and tactics can happen on that side of the board. So he goes back and forth, definitely much better than I do. I get a bit tunnel visioned, I think. And so we can see that he's really making sure that all of his pieces are playing a role in the game. Black is kind of forced into blocking with the knight. And now this rook is pressuring the knight and pressuring the queen. I'm not sure if there's a knockout blow or anything here, but it feels like there's a lot of potential. Bishop f8 could be an option for black at some point to try and get those dark squares a bit more safe. And we'll switch back to Sam's game. We saw him relocating the knight last time we looked. And black has just played queen b6. Perhaps my favorite move in chess. Queen b6, attacking this diagonal, putting pressure on the pawn, putting pressure on the king, putting pressure on the b pawn. It's just a really nice all-around move. And white has some decisions to make in this position. Whether to relieve the tension in the center, whether to give up this pawn, whether to move the king, whether to go all in on the king side. Lots of decisions for white in this position. The threat right now is queen takes pawn check and picking up the knight at the very least. So that's our big threat here. But Sam has plenty of time on the clock, so he can take a moment and consider all the ramifications of his next move. Scrolling back to Harshal, who we saw was threatening checkmate. It appears that after h3, black backed the queen up to stay on that file, and white is looking to trade off one of the bishops to make sure that they're keeping their kings safe. Knight might get trapped. This knight might get trapped, you're right. Yeah, that knight might be in trouble. So even if the king moves, maybe the pawn falls and the knight gets trapped. So I guess then the question is, we can't move the bishop because the pawn is actually pinned right now. So we're looking at king, queen takes, and yeah, maybe that knight's trapped. Wow, what happened right before this? Opened up the diagonal, trying to open up that center further. Yeah, e4 is definitely a reasonable idea. Definitely a move to consider. But perhaps this diagonal is too weak. If there's not a hurry here, perhaps king h1 first would have helped. Yeah, not a normal knight trap with it in the middle of the board like that. All right, this game we still have going. Black avoids the trade of bishops. So they had the bishop pair. They're attacking. They're down a pawn. And he does the principled thing, avoids the trade as much as he can. So I like that. And this game's still going. We've got all 4 games still going at this point. We can see that black is down a couple of pawns in a same-colored bishop endgame, which means that this is winning for white. 3 connected passed pawns. But he should be pretty proud of how he played here. I didn't see any huge mistakes. Maybe get developed a little faster. Perhaps that led to the loss of a pawn or two, but I mean, for an unrated player over the board, that is a nice fight. I've certainly been in worse positions against National Masters than this. All right, this is the board we just looked at. White is trying to chase down this bishop, trying to get this 2-on-1 majority going. Right, they're up the pawn, and so if they can create that passed pawn, it'll really tie black down. Okay, so how did this end up happening? We did see the knight sacrifice. He moved the king, took the pawn, the knight was trapped. He sacrificed on f7. That is what I expected. And that is a nice knight. That is a nice knight. I'm not sure how much it's going to mean, but black does need to be careful here, for sure. Okay, and we'll switch over to this attack. Let's see, and white resigned. Uh-oh. Something went wrong. So we saw an exchange here. Oh. A queen sack for almost checkmate. Queen captures, king captures, and if this knight was not on the board, this would be checkmate. The queen would block, and then we'd capture, and it would be a beautiful checkmate. However, it does not quite work because this knight has the backwards move to block. Oh, wow. Boy, that would have been really nice, yeah. The two bishop checkmate with the pawn helping. But unfortunately, it did not quite work. But good try to Farouk. So this is the game where we are down a piece. This game we are down some pawns. This is the most even. We're down one pawn, so we'll leave this up as I update the score. Unfortunately, this might not be the round where we get on the scoreboard. But again, definitely some hard-fought games. So it is now 0-5. Okay, so black has managed to keep the material on the board, but I don't see any weaknesses in white's position. So I'm not sure where we're going to be targeting. Black is now down a bit on time. So black has to find reasonable moves without trading material, which looks pretty tough in this position. I see lots of moves that trade material. Yeah, he's up the piece, but he's deciding what to do with that rook still. This has been... Oh, I didn't fast forward. The rook moved. And Sam says, fine, take my bishop. I don't need that either. As long as we're down some material, we might as well be down all the material, right? But this does look good for Willie Johnson. And he doesn't see the checkmate. I don't see the checkmate. And we can see white is down some material. The black king is a bit exposed, but white is running out of firepower. This game is still going. But it's already decided. So this is really where our focus should be. White offers the trade. Black trade this bishop, which we know is a bad sign, because it means that we're trading pieces down the pawn. Yep, now we've traded more pieces down the pawn, so it's getting closer to an easy game. Bishop c4 check instead of queen h6, so that would have been Sam's game. So in this position, bishop c4 check, queen captures bishop is the idea. So it would be a trade of bishops instead of just giving up the bishop. Probably would have been better, you're correct. Sure, that makes sense. Ooh, he does not give the rook back, and he moves the king. It might be perfectly fine, but it seemed like the most risky option. I thought he would just take that knight with the rook and say, I'm up so much material, it doesn't matter. But he is greedy. He says, I don't need to give back the rook. That knight is not doing anything, which may be true. Okay, so I'm guessing the knight's going to back up. But there doesn't seem to be any kind of checkmates here. The rooks guard each other. Is there some kind of perpetual? Oh, this rook is cutting off a lot of squares. File's cut off. Oh, this next round game already started. Okay. This game still going. This game's decided. Checkmate by white. So we'll go ahead and give them an extra point as white decides what to do here. Open up this match score. 0-6. Yeah, that knight blocking on h7 stopped a lot of the plans I was thinking about. I got ready to say a bunch of them, and then I was like, nope, knight h7. Nope, knight h7. It blocks quite a bit, unfortunately. Okay, so we've got that game up. We've got this game still going, and this game cannot continue yet. But we do have one round 3 game already started. So this apparently is our closest game that is still going. We will finish out our round 2 games before we jump into watching a round 3 game, just to give these players their due time. 2 minutes left for black in this position. And the real problem in this position is not even that black is down a pawn, but that white's pieces are more active. We see this rook dominating the 7th rank, and the black rook passive, and the black knight passive. So even if white was not up the pawn, right, just take one of these, or even maybe both of these pawns off the board, and white would be happy with their position because of their active pieces. You think so? Okay, okay. Maybe he has some chances. Well, we'll stick here. It might be one of those cases where objectively black does have some chances, but it's a position where the more moves you have to make, the more likely you are to make a mistake. White might not have to do anything in order to entice a mistake. But if black can force white to prove the win, then yeah, might have some chances. Okay, so we see that the rook gets more active. Good. Hitting f7. Okay, and we're having to trade rooks, but we're trading a less active rook for a more active. Oh. But just as that happens, we have a fork between the king and the knight, and that's going to be it. We are down the piece. The bishop falls. It all falls apart. So one of those positions where black was doing okay down the pawn, but it's hard to come up with moves that don't lose. But overall, a good fight by Harshal. This game finished. This game's still going. Sam is still trying to create something out of nothing here. But I'm not sure how we're going to stop this rook from coming down. He said he doesn't even need knight h7. Yeah, we've got lots of threats here. Rook down, take the queen. I don't think we can defend both of those, unfortunately. And that's going to be it. Captures with checkmate. So that will end round 2. Good job to the Virginia players. They certainly played well. Good job to the Alabama players. I think they all also played well. Not well enough to win the games, but well enough that they should be proud of their performance so far. I know personally some of my best played games have been losses or draws over the board. Not that many wins that I would say were my games I'm most proud of. Very few of those. Okay, so Let's see which of these games have started. We've got one game going. These other 3 games should be starting momentarily once those players are ready. Okay, this game's still going. This game has started. We're waiting. This game has started, so we're just waiting on one more game between Harshal and his opponent. Okay, this game's going real fast. This is the game that started before the others, so we will fast forward through this opening. We went so fast I didn't even see what opening it was. It's a French exchange. Interesting. White has gotten a pawn to e5. Perhaps that is a theme that Farouk is aiming for. I should have known it would have been a French exchange. I believe when I played Farouk a year and a half ago, that was, well, a year and 7 months ago, that was also a French exchange. Okay, this game has begun, and we have a Trompowsky, I believe. White taking lots of space. Black has some pawn tension and some play on the queen side. All right, this game has begun. E4, E5. Not much to this game yet. We'll come back to it. Looks like it's going to be a Ruy Lopez. And in this game, we had... Whoops. Another D4, D5 game. And White has good control over the center to start. So let's go back to this game. At least initially, this looks like the most exciting. Perhaps that French exchange will heat up in a moment. But this is where we'll spend a little bit of time. We can see White has managed to get another pawn to e5, a good attacking position. And we'll see if this diagonal is a problem for Sam again. Right, the queen's already on b6. There's a pawn here. Will we see consistent problems, or the same types of problems in multiple games? If so, that's a great point to learn from. So this pin looks pretty annoying at the moment. We've got a pawn pinned. We've got a knight pinned. We've got a pawn pinned. A lot of pins going here. This game? Oh, Sishi's game. Oh, game over. Okay, so what happened here? We saw White grab the center pretty early. Black went after a pawn. Oh, and White took this pawn to attack the rook, and Black captured the bishop, no longer able to guard the checkmate. So Black took an undefended piece, but it was a poisoned undefended piece. So tough break there from Black. Probably thought he was getting some material and had nice attacking position, but unfortunately, that king stuck in the center. So, got to get that king to safety a little bit earlier, which can be tricky against d4 openings. So, that is another point for Virginia so far. And, let's see, this looks like an interesting position. So how did this come about? It was a Ruy Lopez. I don't know if we're in theory or not, but I don't love this bishop. And this feels like a lot of pressure on the king's side. I would be awfully worried if I was playing Black here. Of course, if we're in some theoretical position, then there's no reason to be worried, but I would be a bit worried. Okay, a lot of pieces have come off this board, and White no longer has a queen. So let's go ahead and take a look at here. those pins must have done some damage. So this is about where we... Oops. This is about where we left off. He took the pawn, captured back. And a backwards bishop move. A tricky backwards bishop move, pinning that queen to the king. Ouch. Strong knight, but a strong knight is not going to make up for it. Although, black is actually only up 1 point of material, as white has a rook and a piece. But this queen is just going to terrorize this board. There are just too many weaknesses, too many targets. I don't think white is going to have much hope of holding this position. Even though a rook plus a piece is only 1 point less than the queen, practically, objectively, it is usually much stronger for the queen. The rook and the piece just have trouble working together against the queen, especially earlier in the game. And black is just looking to trade those pieces off. Okay, we'll come back to this position. Not much happening. Let's see if white's able to make anything happen with these rooks for a moment. Also, if you guys can think of any ideas or improvements for the stream for future weeks, please let me know, since I will be trying to stream the match each week for Alabama. Maybe some other matches in between if teams need me to. Feedback is always welcomed. Oh, that's just a mean move, right? Rook takes, back rank checkmate. Just dirty. White's idea was that they were going to take on f6 at some point because of the pin on the pawn to the king, but it's not going to work. This is actually a fork between the knight and the rook right now. You save the rook, take the knight. The rook can't come over here to get saved because the queen. I guess in theory you might have the move knight to e3 to hold everything together for the moment. But even then, looks dicey. All right, this game's still going. This game had finished, and this game's still going. We haven't looked at this game much. Come back to here for the moment. White is looking for some kingside pressure. Maybe this queen is aiming for the g3 square. Trying to set up bishop takes f6 or h6 at some point. The black knight definitely could use that f5 square if the pressure ever lessens on the king's side. White also has the option of trying to go for a minority attack at some point. It looks like that type of position. Oh, exciting moves on this board. So white is really trying to pile up on these h7 ideas. And they're trying to open up the position as quickly as they can. And instead of letting it open up, black pushes f5 and shuts down this diagonal. It seems like a very double-edged move. Is this knight going to end up in f7? If we have to play h6 here, does this knight have some problems? I feel like there are just too many weaknesses in black's position right now. And we can see that both of black's bishops are pawns, unfortunately. We got a couple of pawns there. Okay, this game's still happening. I guess he did play knight e3, survived a bit longer. This is still our best chance. So we'll leave it on this game because this is the game where I feel like Alabama has the best chance in the position. Just to give you guys an idea of what this rating matchup looks like. This rating matchup is... Farouk is rated right around 2,000, and his opponent this round is rated 2247. So 250 points, but probably the closest matchup at the moment. It's always hard to stick to one game whenever you can hear the moves going on the other boards and nothing's happening on this one. So we're probably going to come back to it. I just want to maximize the amount of each game we see. Okay, so we're just down the exchange. He did get the queen back. Oh, black gave the queen back. Okay. And that's going to be an easy win. Up the exchange and the pawn. So not much white's going to be able to do there. Black's king and rook are far away from each other, so a fork is unlikely. Whoa. Plays h6, captures the pawn since the queen is guarding. And black moves the queen up. We've got a knight under attack. We've got a bishop under attack, a pawn under attack, a knight under attack. Looks like a pretty crazy position. I'm not sure if white just saves everything and keeps it safe, what black's plan is. But if things stay complicated, that does bode well for tactical opportunities for black. I would like to eventually see a move like c5 just to try and open up these bishops. But obviously there is not a lot of time for that when the king is under so much pressure. Okay, white resigned here. So we got 2 games still going. We'll leave it on this. I'll update that score. Give Virginia their 10 points. I don't want to discourage our Scholastic lower rated players, so they are doing quite a good job. I am hoping we get a stronger lineup in future weeks, but we could have had a stronger lineup this week. I had the opportunity to sub a couple of players after the deadline, but I decided that these players were willing to commit in a timely fashion, and it would be a good experience for them. So if we get stronger players that commit in time for the future matches, they will get to play. But otherwise, I'm going to keep letting Scholastic players of all ratings participate whenever able to. Especially if we end up out of the run for the playoffs, then let's maximize the learning opportunities for our up-and-coming players. So here, white has managed to win a pawn, and it looks like a powerful pawn. By the same token, though, black has managed to save their king. Right? So that is definitely somewhat of a success for black because their king was looking in a lot of trouble. Black's king is defending. White has really managed to activate all of their pieces so far, and white is not worried about their own king. They are looking to break things open here. Wow. Okay, this looks like an exciting position. Just check to see if these games have started. They have not, so that's good. We have one more round. And it looks like Skylar or someone else has been updating the scoreboard on the official site, so thank you for that, since I was not going to get to it during the stream. Okay, so what I'm imagining here is that white is going to be looking to get this rook somewhere over on the king's side to help in the attack. Black is going to be looking to try to keep these files closed, maybe trade off a piece or two. This pawn structure for white looks like it'll be weak if it gets to a pure endgame. Okay, I'm hearing a lot of piece exchanges. Is that a fork? That looks like a fork. We are on the rook. We are on a bishop that cannot be defended. Ah, so tricky. Black tries to win back the pawn, but unfortunately it looks like that does lose material, as the rook coming over is not possible due to knight captures e8. A6 is also weak, so while he was able to survive the attack on the king, the resulting tactics do not look super favorable, although I will say that he did manage to get his bishops a little more open. They are active right now, but it is too late. Okay, so it's really this game we got to focus on. Both players pretty equal on time, right around 5 minutes. And white says, I can open up things further. And black's got to decide, can I capture this pawn? Do I have to play g6, trap my own queen in, and really weaken those dark squares further? I don't know, what do you guys think? Is this a real attack on the king? Or is that black queen enough by itself to hold off these advances by white? I'm not sure what the objective evaluation would be, but I tend to favor the side of the attacker, especially in a time control like this. I can flip the board like this. We can look at it from black's perspective for a moment. Anyone that is watching and cheering for Virginia, I'm sorry that all the boards have been from the perspective of the Alabama players. I didn't even consider that, but it probably just makes sense since I am streaming for Alabama and those are the players I know. So looking at it from this side, how would I feel as black? It's kind of an interesting position in the sense that I'm not sure whether these pieces are doing a better job defending or a better job for white keeping the king trapped in. He plays queen g6, a very calm move. Flip back to the attacking perspective. Very calm move, hitting that bishop. The bishop is technically pinned right now. I guess the question is f6 going to be an issue? Or is g takes h6 going to be an issue? Maybe that bishop is not safe at all. So way back, I think it was in this position, white played g4, saying they weren't worried about their king, but perhaps they should have been. As we can see, the black king is still pretty cozy. Oh, and he takes there and says, take my bishop with check. Wow. And black says, okay, I will. Oh, interesting. If there is a queen trade, this rook is trapped. But if there's not a queen trade, yeah, you can take the pawn first. Not interesting enough. Looks like almost another brilliant game by Farouk. In this last round, players will be facing the opponent of the same board. This game's still going, down the material, but still going. But we'll keep it here. for the moment. I don't think the en passant capture is going to do it, though. It looks like this may go into the final round as a 12-0 score. But it's nice that a lot of these games, at least for a while, definitely seemed like they were fighting games. It gave us something to watch. In these lopsided matches, whenever I'm watching lopsided matches, I always get a little bit, I don't want to say bored, but less interested if the games are all lopsided from like the opening. And I felt like that was not the case so far. There were definitely a few games, maybe even half a dozen games, where I felt like our players had a chance to draw or even win their positions. Unfortunately here, white does not really have anything for the piece other than the activity of this rook and this passed pawn. We haven't gotten any pawns in exchange for it, though. And black's going to get their king out of danger and then retreat their knight and go on from there. This game still going. White is up a lot of material at this point. Looks up like they're up the full rook. Just see how that exchange happened. We did see the fork, but how did black decide to give up the material? So in this position, they decided to move the bishop and give up the exchange. And unfortunately lost the bishop to a very similar tactic on the back rank as to how material was lost earlier this match. So that may be a tactic that the Alabama players need to be a little more aware of, that rook coming down and forking the king and the minor piece. Often that happens when a minor piece is already relatively passive, and so usually does not happen in a good position. Both players under 3 minutes. And we'll just take a moment to relax a bit here, as there's one round to go. Relax, watch this game finish out, and see what kind of fight we get in the final round. Check to make sure everything else is going well. Everything in the Zoom meeting looks good. Everything on Discord looks good. Have to say that so far this has gone smoother than I expected. So that is good to see. Okay, white resigned. So that's going to go ahead and end that game. We have one left. Some of these matches in the final round will be starting. And it looks like the match is going to be ending in 2 hours or a little bit under, just as I was expecting. So that's good. Good to know. I can tell that to the future players. Okay. I don't want to go ahead and put in that 12 yet. Harshal is still playing, so we will give him the benefit of the doubt that it is worth waiting to see if anything happens. Oh, gotta fast forward here. Got a bunch of moves, but no one told me we're actually on this position. I was like, boy, they're really thinking a long time here. Okay, so this game is over. I'm going to go ahead and take a 2-minute break myself to go get some more water. And hopefully the next games have started when I get back. So I'll see you guys in probably less than 2 minutes. All right, let's see if some of these games have begun. I see that we have one game going, and we're waiting for the other 3 to begin. Had to take care of a spider issue, but it has been taken care of. All right. So, let's see here. Okay, this game has begun. This game has begun. Harshal looks like he's about to begin. And is this game beginning? I was going to say, I hope I didn't miss it. We're waiting for this last game to begin. We'll wait a minute before messaging them. And this game is already well along. Whoa. Okay, we've got a gambit. Wow. Okay, then. Black is up some material, but white is up some development. This is the kind of chess that we came for. Let's get that 12 points up. And it looks like all 4 games have begun. Perfect. But let's take a look at this. This looks like a good one to settle into here. White might be trying to queenside castle. Black needs to catch up on some development. But white has only spent 15 seconds, which to me says, have they played this position before? Is this some kind of theory? But I agree, it definitely looks scary for white. Okay, and while black is thinking there, they move their knight. We'll go ahead and check in on the other games. We can see this game is well along in a very closed position. King's Indian type position. And there's not a ton of play on the king side, which is a little worrisome, I would think, since that's usually where black wants to play, but we'll see how that develops. This game we haven't looked at yet. Let's scroll through the opening. That's not scrolling. Scrolling through the opening, we've got a Sicilian, another c3 Sicilian, some piece trades, and we've got this position. Looks very normal so far, not too much happening. We do have some potential tactics down the d file, so white's going to need to be careful of their queen. And in this game, just as a general rule, bishop c4 against the Sicilian, not the best system, because it's just so easy to play e6, and the bishop hasn't really found its correct place yet. But black is going to try and be aggressive here again, and they avoid the trapping of their piece, so it's good they're aware of that. Okay, let's get back to the exciting position. White has managed to queenside castle. And black is looking to open up the king side. Are they just going to try and queen a pawn? This bishop actually can't move now. This is really a fascinating position. I definitely have not seen this position before. And now we see white starting to take a little bit more time. So they aren't quite as familiar with it, although they do play that move relatively fast. A quick check. And what's the plan for the black king? This may be one of those positions where one king looks in trouble and then it's the other king that ends up in trouble, much like the last game we looked at with Farouk, where it was his king that ended up being the one in the most trouble. Is black going to try and go kingside? Is this bishop going to try and move? It looks hard for black to activate all of their pieces, which tells me that white probably at least has some compensation for the material. I don't see how the black queen gets out of this position either. Hearing lots of moves being played on the other boards, so we'll go ahead and scroll through those. This position, not a lot's happened. There's a lot happening on one of these boards. Oh, this board looks pretty empty. White is down a piece. I'm guessing that they had some trouble with those pawns pushing on the queen side. They attacked the knight, and the knight was pinned. Okay? So now we've got a situation where white is simply down a piece, but they're trying to keep the rook active. So, again, good principled chess, avoiding trades when down material. I like it. That's still pretty early on, although that does look like an annoying knight move. And white has white's creating threats on this square. Black has issues on e7, perhaps major issues, and they just have to give up the knight. Ouch. Thank you for the follow. I appreciate it. And this looks like it has gone all wrong for black. This is looking like checkmate coming up here. And that was a game right there. So if you missed any of it, let's scroll through it one more time. Black played a gambit against f4. They threw their pawn up. They won an exchange, but got down in development. And then the black king got stuck in the center and got mated. So a miniature, 18 moves. But very double-edged game. I like the opening choice by black just because it was not calm at all. There were tactics. There were places for white to go wrong. So I like that choice, even though it didn't work out. All right, so scrolling through here. White got checkmated, unfortunately. But 28 moves, so lasted a while. This game is still going. And this game is still going. So 2 chances left for Alabama to make sure that we don't put up a donut on the scoreboard. 2 games left. Okay, in this position, white is threatening to play g5. And the H file is open, so who's that going to be the best potential for? I'm not sure at this point. It's kind of hard for this bishop and king both to occupy g7. The black rooks aren't really ready to come over to the H file, so that's a bit concerning. So here we see that white is controlling the A file, and it looks like white is going to be trying to control the H file as well. So black needs to find a way to fight for one of these files. Looks like they're trying to activate the knight. Not sure if this just drops that pawn or not, though. Knight takes, or something like that. Oh, the bishop's on it. That passive bishop is still defending, so I guess that's okay. But both of black's knights might be ending up on the rim here. We can exit out of this game, exit out of this game, and we're down to these 2 games. A quick look back at Harshal, who has even material here and still seems to be applying the pressure against a strong opponent. You would think by now that I would have memorized the ratings. That is not true. So his opponent is rated 2124, and Harshal is 1288. So 850 points or so. But you wouldn't tell it from the current position. Time is also even. Okay, we'll come back to that one. Seems like it's still a little bit earlier in the game. Move 15. And we'll go ahead and finish off with this position. Whoa, what happened here? Pushed, took the knight. Took the knight. Took the pawn. Okay. So currently, black is up a pawn. If the knight takes, we recapture with the queen with check. If black or white takes, then black captures the queen. Okay. And is this bishop going to get in trouble? So something like queen takes, bishop blocks. Then what? Has to play that. He's forced into it. Bishop blocks. And now we've got the queen under the attack. And we've got this bishop under attack. So how does black save both? We can't take this bishop, and black resigned. The bishop is trapped. The queen has to retreat, and then black has all the play. There's probably a checkmate coming on the H file. So well done to the Virginia player. Went 4-0. Well done to Farouk. He had chances in all 4 games against higher rated opponents. Okay, and our final game going is Harshal. Our last chance for Alabama here. Black took a while to make their move there. Retreating their knight. Now white has to decide how to proceed. This e5 pawn could become a weakness, or it may be a strength, depending on if white can launch some kind of attack. Black currently has the d file, but I think that white should be able to challenge that without any real issues. White knight may be better than the black knight. White bishop may be better than the black bishop. No big edges here. So black's trying to get that queen into the position. Threatening to win this pawn. This pawn is also hanging in a lot of positions. And that's why white decided to guard the queen. So the queen is not hanging if the bishop moves. And black goes after the pawn. Okay, and it looks like black might just be up a pawn. Oh, wait. White's attacking this hanging pawn. White has threats on the queen. There's some tactics here. If the queen retreats, maybe white can get some kingside pressure. Okay, the queen retreats, guards the pawn. But right now, the black knight is not involved in the game. And so if white can create some pressure, keep this knight off sides, then white is not really down a pawn yet. They're not down a pawn until they let black consolidate and catch up in position. So once this knight gets to a good square and black is able to trade off queens, then they're up a pawn. So I like this move because it immediately says I'm going to go after your king side. I know I'm down a pawn, so I need to attack. So it's definitely showing the right general plans. We've got ideas of maybe playing the bishop, rook lift, and we can see that black's pieces are mainly on the queen side. So this is what white should be going for. I thought maybe queen to g4 with the idea of bishop h6 right away, but I'm not sure if that threat holds. Hitting the c-pawn as well, very good. Okay, that makes sense. So he was going to h5 with the idea of going after this pawn also. So very, very true. So nice move by Harshal. That knight has to retreat to guard the c-pawn. It blocks the file. So can white use this time for anything? One concern I would have is that black plays knight to f6 and says, go ahead and win your pawn back for the queen trade. But white is challenging the d file right away. So white has all four of their pieces right back into the game. Yep. Yeah, and I think once knight f6 happens, there's not going to be a lot of pressure. Bishop back. Okay, I guess he's just trying to get the rook lift in. But after knight f6 hitting the queen, now the queen has to move, and there's not time for a rook lift because there are going to be issues on the back rank. We see again an Alabama player putting a minor piece on the back rank and running into potential tactics on the back rank with a check against the king and the minor piece. So that's happened in at least 2 games we've seen, maybe even 3. And even though it hasn't happened in this game yet, I'm definitely seeing that as a potential. And so I would be concerned about that in future games for them as well. That is something that they should at least be aware of so that they are making this decision with the knowledge that they are allowing the possibility of those tactics. Okay, the queen retreats, which is good. If these rooks trade, then black can trade more rooks. It's a little bit too easy for black to trade on the file right now. Maybe this bishop should go this way. I think I would have liked to see the bishop go to g5 if it was going to go anywhere. Because right now it really is passive on the c1 square. And white doesn't have a good way to avoid this trade because if white moves the rook off of the file, then the only file on the board is controlled by black. So that is an issue. If white leaves the rook there, then they get traded. Yep, so now we see that black controls the open file. Okay, so we're avoiding issues on the back rank. I like that. Maybe we need to push this h-pawn down the board. Try to make something happen. Black says, this trade is just a winning endgame for me. Yeah, especially if white makes that trade. I think white had to throw in that check. White had to throw in that check. But black has doubled pawns. Although the move e5 probably just ends things right now because it creates a passed pawn. But interesting in this position would be to throw in this check. And then make luft for the king. I think there was probably a lot of play still left in that position. This a-pawn is weak. The black king would have to go onto a light square. Possibilities of checking later on. So, yeah, that's what I would do, even if it doesn't win. This position is probably just too easy. Although I am a little surprised that they did not play e5. Although they always have time to play f6 and e5 later. Unfortunately, white just has to sit and wait since they cannot play, they cannot create a passed pawn. So if you're going to trade down into an endgame, especially a king pawn endgame, and you are not up in material, then you better be able to create a passed pawn. Because in this position, white's going to play some moves. Black's going to get their king to the square they want, and then they're going to create their passed pawn. And white is just going to kind of sit there. No inroads for the white king. But having a game against someone 850 points higher, and it goes to a king pawn endgame where you're down one doubled pawn, you can't be too upset with yourself for that. Maybe he's thinking about the g4 move. I don't know. There's not a lot to try here. But we'll let him play it out. We might as well. And black's really thinking here. I would be playing f6 and e5 without any thought here. Yep, there's f6. e5, g4, e4. Because this pawn doesn't even have to queen. All it has to do is distract the white king, hold the white king in place so that this king can walk around the board and do whatever it wants. Maybe step the king up. Really do whatever you want. This king cannot actually take any of the pawns, so... Probably king f3. Maybe try and push the g-pawn. I know if I was still playing this position, I'd start to think about stalemate tricks. Unfortunately, the passed pawn is a center pawn. And often the center pawns becoming queens lead to less stalemate tricks. Whenever it is like a bishop pawn, you can always try and catch them in some kind of weird stalemate on one of the end squares. But that center pawn at queens, and it just doesn't trap the king anywhere. And of course, with all these pawns left, stalemate would be challenging anyway. But I like the idea of getting rid of some of these pawns. Here, black should not capture, because that gives white a chance to create a passed pawn. Yes, it's still winning for black, but that's really white's only chance, is to be able to create a passed pawn. So black should just let white capture, recapture, and all the pawns are stuck. Many blitz and bullet games that I've played from my side and my opponent's side have ended because in a position like this, one of us captured and suddenly that passed pawn ended up being too far away from the king. In this case, it's not, so it doesn't matter. The king's going to walk in, but just something to keep in mind. Take this moment to thank everyone that stopped out to watch the stream and support the States Cup, to support Virginia, support Alabama chess. Thank you for everyone that supported the stream with follows. I appreciate that. I look forward to covering more matches for sure. This was really a lot of fun. And if it's this fun whenever the team is not winning, I can imagine that it is going to be a blast once these matches get close. We still have our sights set on the playoffs. So we just have to hope Virginia wipes the floor with everyone else also. Lots of strong teams in this league, so this is going to be a great experience for all the players involved. Okay, he's going to try and queen that H-pawn. Might as well pre-move, right? 2-second increment. Anything can happen. Black is also moving fast, so stalemate trick time. Run to the corner. Nope. No stalemates. All right. Good game. Well played to our opponents. Well played to the Alabama players. I hope everyone involved had a great time. I will see you next week for our next match. Not sure when it is yet. Got to decide if it needs to be rescheduled. But otherwise, yeah, we will see you guys again. Virginia, good luck in the rest of the season. Thank you. You guys played well also. All right. Have a good night. Oh, let me go ahead and update this right before we leave. Make it official. Put the 16 on there. All right. Have a good night and good luck in all your games.